Oh, that's better. Phew. Hi, Julie. Okay. Oh, you're on mute. Hi. Hi, Sophia.
On mute now.
You okay?
What am I doing? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing.
Right, okay. So first things first, I'm going to, can I disable the chat function? How do I do that? I'm going to try and disable the chat function because that's so
But the chat's just panelists, isn't it?
Is it?
It says all panelists. You can choose. I'm not sure, but if we need to communicate, we're going to do it via our own teams.
Hosts and panelists. Hosts and panelists. Okay, well, I'll leave the chat on. I'll just tell people to put things in the Q&A. So the Q&A works. You can, you have a list of open questions, and once you've answered them, they disappear off the open list, or you can dismiss them, and that means you don't have to answer them and they disappear off the list as well. And then I'll download them all at the end.
Okay, so it's the same as Teams, basically. I can publish or dismiss.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do I change? I think I come up as Alison on here, don't I?
No, it says Pete Mitchell.
Right, okay.
Might want to blur your background, Pete.
Hey?
Might want to blur your background.
What, Noah's bedroom?
We can call you Alison if you like, Pete.
Call me what you want later.
Easy, Tiger.
Just gonna send that.
Have any panelists got any specific subject and matter that they don't want to answer a question on that I should avoid?
You may be able to spot them. So
Well, I hope so, but I'm just,
Yeah.
just asking,
Yeah.
just in case.
Just, yeah.
How do we, for later, Victoria, how do we share our screen? Oh, screen
You
share.
give it a go now, yeah, screen share, and just make sure you're in presentation mode on PowerPoint.
Just get the right screen up.
Give it a go.
Hi, Gavin. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Julie.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Gavin. I think I've got most presentations.
I'm just gonna try this. Is that, can anybody see that? Oh no, share now. Sorry. Share.
Yeah, perfect.
Hooray. Right. Then I stop sharing. I don't know how to do that. Stop share. There we go. Okay.
Victoria, are you going to introduce the different people or me, or are you doing it, I presume, or?
I can do it if that's all right, because I'll try and I'll be trying to keep us all to time, and I will, if I think that you look like you're overrunning, I'll give you a 3-minute warning, and then when we get to the end of your session, I will politely butt in and ask you to just kind of wind it up in 30 seconds so that we can keep roughly to time and finish on time, and not put lots of pressure on David at the end to do his slides in 5 minutes.
No, I'm fine with that.
What about who we can see? So will I go off, turn my screen off and turn it on when I'm asking the questions? How does it work?
So as panelists, all of your cameras will just be on all the time. We won't be able to see any of the delegates. You can turn your camera off. It might make sense to turn your camera off when you're not speaking, because otherwise you're all kind of sat there like you're up on a platform or something. So you might want to turn your cameras off when you're not speaking. And then, yeah, Sophia, if you've got questions, I'll at the end of each session, well, on the ones where we're on the agenda where we've put time for questions, I'll see if we've got any. If we haven't got time, if the agenda doesn't give time for questions, but we have a bit of time, I'll ask if there's any.
So I'll just wait for your cue.
Okay.
Okay.
Is everybody here? Let me just check everybody off. So I can. So
Alvin,
Alvin's here now.
Alvin,
Julie, investing.
there, mate.
Can you hear us, Alvin? Alvin.
Is he thrown? Oh, no.
No. Alvin, you can't hear. Can you hear us? No.
No.
He's checking. He's checking.
Okay.
Not only can't he hear us, he's disappeared as well.
Gonna do us a note.
There's an echo. If we all mute ourselves when we're not speaking as well, that probably make it easier. So I'm only missing David's here. So we're missing Teresa. Lisa's on holiday.
And Ed.
What's that?
Ed.
Oh, right, okay. And Ed, yeah.
Alvin, can you hear us?
No, he's having problems. He says on Teams.
Okay.
On Teams? It should be on Zoom. That's the start.
No, I'm talking to him on Teams. Sorry,
Oh,
we're
all
on
right.
Zoom.
Wow.
Hi, Teresa.
Flipping heck.
IT Liversidge up there.
Not really.
Techno babe.
Is everybody else okay sharing their slides?
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay. We've all done it.
You doing ours, Matt? Did you say? Yeah. Hi, Teresa.
Hi there. Oh, we've got 19 people. We had 98 people booked. I sent out the invitation. I sent out the joining instructions yesterday, and I accidentally, everybody got one email, but it had the same message repeated in it 98 times. So it'll be the longest email. I hope none of them printed it off because it will be 98 pages long. It was a mail merge failure. But only one landlord has pointed it out today. But there was no personal info on it or anything. It was just the same boring info repeated 98 times in one.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you twice on the screen though.
Yeah, I know. I might have to come off my computer. Who shall I email the presentation to? Bizarrely, it's failed to detect my speaker on my computer.
Oh, right, you're using your phone instead?
No, I'm on my iPad. Who can I email the presentation to?
You email it to me. If you email Victoria at unipol.org.uk.
And then I'll come off my laptop.
Yeah.
I'm on the iPad as well because it won't work on my laptop. I think, Alvin, I've ignored the one, we had an email a couple of weeks ago about connecting your thing to the system or something. I don't know if you had one, but I did. I haven't done anything about it. And I think maybe that's the reason why the laptop's not playing ball.
Okay. I'll send that to you now, and then I'll stay on here. I better just double check that I've got enough charge on this phone.
When we've got a full screen, how do you get the icons at the top for mute and stuff then? Because mine have now gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if you touch the screen, they should reappear.
Oh, yeah. Cuts out the top layer, doesn't it? Yeah.
Should have that, Victoria. I suppose actually, I could probably keep both and present on the screen and just turn this one blank, turn this screen blank.
Yeah, we can do that as long as you mute one of them.
One of them. Well, no, because I can't completely hear off the other. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you now fine, yeah.
Just get you in stereo for your picture, Alvin.
Yeah.
Stereo.
You can choose your best side.
Two of
Your
them.
best side,
He's
yeah.
working that hard. No wonder he gets lots of work done. There's two of them.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Have you got, so did you find your charger?
Yeah.
It might be better to just have one of you then.
If you want to do the presentation, then I'll come off this one.
Okay. Oh, you want me to show you presentation?
Yeah, I could do the presentation I could join back and do the presentation. I'm happy to do that.
I see. Right. Okay. I don't mind showing your slides. You've not got many actually, have you? So it should be.
You told me to keep it brief.
Yeah.
No questions. Let me just shut my door if I've not got my headphones on.
Yeah. I'm just going to go and get my headphones.
You have the same problem, Pete, you say?
Yeah, well, I think I've ignored I had an email from IT a couple of weeks ago about doing some upgrade or something, which I haven't done. And that's
yeah. Well, to be honest, I sit for training on Zoom, it was fine.
Yeah, well, I ignored it, so the laptop doesn't work now, but the iPad does.
Yeah, somebody said if you're connected to the VPN, you might have problems. If you're not, that's probably why I was connected at home.
Yeah, I maybe need to take the laptop in and reconnect it tomorrow and do what they told me to do.
Right, I will. I'll get us started in a moment so that we start on time. Right, we all ready? Can you hear me? Okay. I'll just put my headphones in, but they're not brilliant. Okay, right. I will admit all the panelists. The participants. We've only got 39 people so far, so I'll leave it a minute. Actually, no, it's started.
Just, Victoria, one last thing.
Yeah.
The chat that we can see, if we just chat with the panelists, that's just us that can chat to each other.
That's
and
right.
then the attendees list is if we want to message people in the attendees list.
That's right. Yeah, I'll encourage people to use the Q&A rather than the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
fine. Thanks.
Okay. How do I admit all of the attendees?
It does. Sorry, it does say, because recording is on, that everyone in the meeting can see and save messages sent to everyone.
Okay.
So maybe we should just use our Teams if we want to say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Outside of drama.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know, on the Q&A, how do you actually write a question, or can we only answer questions?
Don't be writing any, Linda.
Well, one for Pete. Why are you though? It says only hosts and panelists can see the questions.
Okay. Right. I think. Right. Okay. I think actually the event has started, and all of the panelists, all of the attendees are here with us. So I'm going to get us started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Landlords, the Nottingham City Council Landlord Group Forum. My name is Victoria from Unipol, and I'm going to be facilitating the event today. So today is really about keeping you up to date with what's happening in the private rented sector in Nottingham, and it's a partnership event between the Council and Unipol. Before we get started, I wanted to run through some housekeeping with you. We are recording today's event, and this will go online when it's been edited down for other people to see. We've got a busy agenda today with lots of speakers. So if you have any questions for them, please type them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be using the Q&A rather than the chat. If there's a natural pause or time in the agenda for questions, they will be put to the speaker. So put things into the Q&A when you're ready. If there are too many questions to respond to, because we've got limited time today, then they'll take these away after the event, and answers will be put into the next edition of the Nottingham City Council Landlord newsletter. You'll have been sent the detailed agenda in your booking email. We have a 5-minute break planned for 2:50, so we can all rest our eyes. But we're going to start with an introduction from Pete Mitchell, who's the head of service at the council. Following that, there'll be updates on lots of different topics, including waste management, anti-social behaviour, bypass meters, which is particularly relevant at the moment, housing legislation update from the NRLA, and updates from Unipol and Dash. And then we'll be finishing with some information from David Hobbs on the consultation on selective licensing. We will aim to finish at 3:45 today, and I will help the speakers to keep on time so we can all do that. So we've got a really packed roster of speakers, and I'm going to hand over to Pete Mitchell to get us started.
Well, thank you very much there. As I said, my name is Pete Mitchell. I'm head of regulations. I've got broadly covering safer housing, which is additional licensing, mandatory licensing and selective licensing, plus the safer housing functions of environmental health. And that also includes the tall buildings, post-Grenfell kind of work around the high-rise buildings. I also work closely with my colleagues across the council, waste, planning, building control, community safety, community protection, anti-social behaviour and housing strategy to try and pull some of these strands we've got within housing that we're doing and working across the city, trying to pull the things together. So hopefully we've got an agenda for you here that hopefully will answer some questions around some of the issues we're facing. And we'll also give you an opportunity to ask questions and we can do some engagement and information sharing with you. But so that's really it from me. Thank you.
Great, okay, thanks Pete. So I'll hand over to Alvin Henry, who's the Waste Operations Manager from the Council, and who's going to talk about waste management.
Thank you, Victoria, and good afternoon, everyone. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you guys a while back, so it was a very positive meeting and a lot of discussions going on around how we can best facilitate some of your issues. Is the slide up, Victoria? So I'm the head of commercial and domestic waste for Nottingham City Council, and within my team, we look after all of the residual collections, garden waste collections, dry mix recycling, bulky waste collections, replacement bins, and of course all of the trade waste as well. So could you show the next slide, please? So I was asked just to give 20 minutes today, and I've left a lot of time for questions at the end, probably because I've met some of you guys before, and waste is incumbent to all you guys, and it's touched so many of your residents and so many of your occupiers as well. So really, since COVID, and I'm not really going to pre-labour the issue of COVID, we had an additional 10,000 tonnes in 2002, which probably peaked to about 6% rise in 2021, which was about 4,500 additional waste collected. But now I've really tackled the team to kind of get back to the day-to-day measures of waste. So good communication, aligning ourselves to policy, strategy as well in terms of what we've aligned ourselves to with the corporate aims, making sure we've got enough capacity, obviously as the city grows, purpose-built student accommodations, and the next generation of the 3-year plan of the planning portal, obviously to get our eyes over that, to make sure we've got enough resource aligned to the housing population in Nottingham. And I think education as well is key in terms of when we expect residents to get it wrong, but it's not about just the enforcement side of things. We do link into Pete, where we've got repeat offenders and our colleagues at community protection. But I think in Nottingham, we've always been, our first option has always been to educate, and even from the guys who are on the missed bin rounds, you know, if it's a contaminated bin, rather than just go to the house and collect the bin, they'll always try and knock onto the door and engage with that resident before they load the contents of that bin, to kind of show them the offending item, to try and get that good behaviour there. And then, of course, looking at national practice as well. So there's a lot of good work going on nationally. Again, you know, it's not about, for the last 2 years, we've been really working into it with ourselves, just trying to get the day-to-day done. So it's getting those good practices ingrained again for the next cycle of what's going to come. Next slide, please. So I talked on about that waste. And you know, these are probably some of the problems, you know, what face the residents and your occupiers for the last couple of years. We know the problem in terms of bins on streets. We have a spike intake where students fluctuate and exodus the city, and when vice versa when they come back. That's more noticeable now around the student purpose-built buildings. And I've challenged my team to say, look, while we've got the infrastructure of a weekly alternative collection, or we've engaged with the management agency or residents or landlords about the infrastructure of a weekly alternative collection, what do we put in place when we get that spike? So when we know we've got 400 people leaving, or 500 people, or many people in an area like Lenton leaving at the same time, we're going to be left with that problem. So I'll touch on to that in the next slide. But that's the kind of issues we've been facing, and we face, and we've probably got wrong. We've reacted pretty quickly, but we've not got ahead of the game. So that's our next challenge for me and my team. Next slide, please. So I wanted to touch as well and talk today about the Environment Bill. Some of you may not, and some of you may not be aware of that. So basically, COP26 and the environment agenda. So this was prior to Brexit. It should have been in 2021, which got delayed. So the government went to consultation with all local authorities and waste collection businesses who were providing that service for collection authorities, and gave a series of options and consultation. And I think the free hit here really, there was many things, from free garden waste collections. I can't see that materialising with the likes of the cost of the implication to that. So, but what I picked on the free, which I think will have an indication. So food waste collections. So the indication from DEFRA and RAP and ministers is that by 2024-25, local authorities will have to offer a mandatory weekly food waste collection to every property. Some councils will probably do that slightly different. Some do that currently with food waste and garden waste, and we don't do that. We just do garden waste because of our outlet. So by 2024-25, councils will have to start to implement that. They will have probably a 6-year gap because of the disposal contracts to kind of implement and phase that in. So that'll be something new for the residents and most of the councils throughout the UK. A deposit return scheme, and all of these are obviously yet to be finalised in terms of subject to consultation, which we're probably imminent to be informed by government. The deposit return scheme will look something obviously as it was back in the day when we were all looking for extra money as kids, and we used to all run in the house and get our glass bottles and take them to the shop and get a new ball what went over the fence. So similar to that, there will be probably these units set up at local supermarkets, local hubs. And again, as residents either do their weekly food shop, they'll return, the thinking is they'll return their items, whether it be aluminium cans, glass bottles, that target materials, and they'll get that discount or whatever that will be in terms of their shopping, or credited to probably their mobile phone or app. And then the extended producer license means a lot of things to many people. I think you start to see it now at local concerts where you have a small deposit in terms of that cup and you take that back. I hope it's not that, because for me it's about the increased emphasis on the manufacturers to make that material right and make it right for recycling. And of course, some people are also looking into that as fulfilling those costs. So if you've got somewhere like McDonald's, KFC, constantly their product is littering the highway, councils will be able to kind of levy that or charge those for that waste collection element of that. So they're the three things really, the three strands to pick out of the Environment Bill, which is due imminently for the end of the consultation. It should have been at the end of Brexit, and then obviously it got delayed again because of COVID. But as a council, we've obviously participated and put our comments back to government. Next slide, please. And then I think for us really, and I didn't want to go on to touch on COVID and our tough experience, about looking forward for me and my team. So we're in now the end of year academic, so we've got a partnership approach, very much a partnership approach with the universities, community protection, Pete Mitchell's team, our street scene colleagues, obviously waste management, community engagement, and our neighbourhood development officers to kind of, and the students themselves, and tenants and residents to kind of look at that and design that strategy. So there is additional resources and an additional plan going into that area as we speak now. And that won't just be for this end of the year. We'll pick out those key elements of obviously the term time. We're working with a consultant company as well to produce a new waste strategy for Nottingham. So that's currently being drafted. That's going through the internal governance of Nottingham and put before members. And then that will go out to the electorates to consult on that. And then that will shape that document about how we deal and treat the waste. Of course, that will follow on for policy, because without any good strategy, we have to have policy and good behaviour and good strands. And then working with the 6 boroughs, I should have been there today, but I'm here, the counties and the RAP, we're obviously aligning that food waste collection. So we're looking at it as a collective. We're not going to collect all of the food waste for Nottinghamshire, but we're using all of the resource in terms of RAP and DEFRA as a county to look at waste optimisation models. So if you, wherever you live in the county, when it comes to food waste, you will all get the same standard of level of provision. And of course, that's opened the doors to the thinking to more about what do we do in terms of recycling as well, because that's a national pet hate. People will come down from different geographical parts of the UK and say, well, they don't recycle, obviously, like that where I live, and that's a particular key issue in the student areas. And then the implementation of bulky waste charge, we put, and I said this the last time we met at this meeting, that is now implemented. It went live, she went live on the 1st of April, and it went live on the 26th of April, I believe. So it's still relatively cheap. So for 6 items, residents can get the bulky waste removed for £20. So that is now a policy decision which was rubber stamped and implemented now. And we've not seen too much detriment. We have a monitoring policy, or we have a monitoring element in there as well in terms of monitoring the fly tip. So we've not seen a significant reduction in fly tip. We've not seen a significant peak either. If anything, the 2 months since we've implemented that scheme, the reported fly tipping has reduced somewhat significantly, actually, as people thought it might have went up the other way. And then in Nottingham City Council, we are aligning street cleansing and grounds maintenance in public realm. We used to be together. So the thinking is now there is a report what's gone to ACAS to put that street cleansing element, I'll say, back in with waste, because it probably moved in 2009, probably 2003, 2008, to put waste and street cleansing back together. So that will make more of that kind of approach and joined up thinking from a waste element and a street cleansing element a lot more harmonised. So for me, what that would mean for me is that a lot of the street cleansing go and sweep the streets out of sync with our collection rounds. And I think once you've got that resource as a whole, you could obviously coherently replace that and align that a lot more enhanced as it would. So basically, if your bin day was a Tuesday, you'll get your bins emptied on a Tuesday, and you'll probably look to get your street swept on a Wednesday. Something what they can't currently do, because that model defunctions that, and it's too broke up, and nobody's got the resource to follow my resource round. So once that comes back in as a resource, it would obviously, hopefully, that's the strategy I'm probably looking to plan. And then, of course, as that food waste element comes out the residual bin, it would be foolhardy for councils not to look at another collection round review as well, because if we're picking up less yield in our residual waste, obviously we want to be making sure our rounds are optimised, and we're taking full maximisation of the vehicles. And that's it, really. The rest I'm open to conversation and questions.
Right, thank you very much for that, Alvin. I don't know if we had any questions that people wanted, that landlords wanted to put to Alvin about waste collection, or any of the issues that were covered in the presentation.
I can't see any on the Q&A, Victoria, but one that we've had sent in to Dash is a bit of a frustration, really, basically saying, it ain't rocket science. The students come, the students go every year, and it's been like that in the city. What assurances have we got that this year that things are going to be, we're on it? Do you know what I mean? That we're going in the right direction. Does that kind of make sense? And I guess that's for you guys at Unipol as well, really, from that student side. Just a little bit of are we on the right lines now, working together? What's changed, that sort of thing. It just seemed so to me. But
I'll be honest, I think in 2020 we probably we all just took a step back because of COVID, and students obviously weren't living in the city. And I think 2021 it was more about we were probably still sitting back, still dealing with COVID, especially in my area. We still, a lot of services switched off, and then obviously a lot of noise around that. And I think then when we come back in 2021, when the students came, and in terms of walking the streets and speaking to a few management agencies, is that because they were still under lockdown, there was a lot of waste coming out frequently, and then at the end of term there was also a lot of repairs. So there was a lot of, obviously, carpets, kitchen furnitures, etc. So I think it was a bit of a double whammy. And then I have to concede, and I accept that officers, all of us, we didn't then do that joined up thinking quickly enough, because we're probably still back in 2020, whereas who was doing this work? So we've heard loud and clear from landlords, we've heard loud and clear from elected members over this, and we've got our ducks in a row this year.
Could I just jump in there to support Alvin, really? This year, I think we were caught out in 2020, so we are looking. We've drawn a plan up here over the next 4 weeks with Alvin's kind of waste crews, is street scene, my staff, that's selective additional and HMO staff, the CPOs, and trying to pull it all together to get people out there working with Unipol, working with the university, and also we're going to try some of the letting agents as well, trying to get out and about with them. We're also funding we're funding an additional bin crew, whatever Alvin calls them, in and around that area to get on top of it. And we're using the money from fines, the housing fines we've accumulated over the year. So we're going to fund that and see if that works, because I fully understand that if students leave on a Saturday or Sunday and they put their rubbish out and they do the right thing, but the bin crew doesn't pick up till Friday, it's out there for 5 days through no fault of their own. So actually, if we can get on top of that, and this additional kind of round, or whatever you want to call it, Alvin, can shift it Monday and get on top of it, we should be able to get on top of some of the visual effects and it's little things like that. So we're going to try this action plan, see if it works. I'm not saying we're going to get on top of everything, but we were caught out in 2020 and probably 2021 at COVID. And Alvin took very few crews because a lot of people were going to have COVID and all sorts of stuff. So we have got a plan this time. So hopefully it will try and get on top of that quicker and deal with the residents' concerns and indeed, students who are leaving rubbish out that's not being collected, and they've tried to do the right thing. So
yeah, I'm glad you said that, as about it being the university and the students as well, because this is often seen as a landlord issue, but obviously it's not always a landlord issue. It can be a tenant behaviour issue as well. So I'm reassured that you've said that.
And I think yesterday we put a staffing delegated decision, again funded for 2 additional waste advisors. And again, if you draw that, ring fence that funding, that would be just for that areas of the student triangle. And I think that's very much linked to the student living strategy and the outcome, what that comes. But I think once you've got that presence in there, roaming around in terms about, good, what does good recycling look like, bin collection days, that constant reminder. But also within the student strategy, when I look at the round reviews, there is something in there for me to look at harmonising that round, because currently what you've got is out of about 4,500 properties, you've probably got about 3,000 on a Wednesday collection, 700 on a Thursday collection, and then the bottom end on the hard to access on a Friday collection. So from the students, it was very much, if that could be a Monday and Tuesday, that would take away the issues of not bins on streets, but
the residual waste and things that build up. Yeah.
And also there's a lot of movement between the drives to the triangle, and I think that's the confusion as well, because of different collection days. So it's not as simple as that, because we've got to look at the whole city in terms of mapping that out, because if I take that resource from somewhere, I'm going to affect somebody else's collection day. So I've said, look, it's probably one for us to look at when we do the food waste. We've got the food waste in, and then we look at the round reviews to probably shape the days then.
But indeed, Alvin, if the landlords want bulky waste collected, they're throwing mattresses out and whatever else out, you're well equipped to deal with that, get it booked onto the system, and you'll pick it up. So it just need, we will, but they need to be booked on, don't they? So and we will pick them up.
I think for me, it's about preparation. I think, we've got an infrastructure, whatever you've got, I think is what you've got. As good as you think you've got it, is always going to be put under pressure when it's tested. And I think that's the thing, is that so many people leave at the same weekend, and that's when the infrastructure falls down, and that's where we need to align that additional resource. It's getting harder to do, because we don't have a free bulky waste collection now. So if we wanted to provide this for free, it would have to go by an elected members would have to sign that off, quite rightly so, as a council should run. But ultimately this year, you know, we've got officers who have been creative enough to put resources and funding into that.
So we have a couple of questions in on the Q&A, and the first one is, I have properties in a block of flats and waste removal is an element of the service charge. Why is this? It appears we're paying twice as there is no council tax reduction.
So we have no say, as I've got going back to somebody today regarding this. So we have no say in terms of if you live on so when I used to live at City Heights, I paid council tax and I paid a communal charge. So I assume that charge for me was to clean the stairwell, the footwell, and the roof, what was on that. And we have no control in terms of what the management agencies cost and stipulate onto that. Our statutory obligation as a waste collection authority is to collect household waste, whether it be residual recycling, garden waste. You know, we can and we do enforce, or we not enforce, but we do charge for receptacles. That's within the waste regulations. So that part of that element, what they might pay to their management agency, how they dress that up in terms of waste collections, you know, is outside our jurisdiction. I will say there is times where management agencies do pay for additional waste collections. I'm not saying that don't happen, but it's very, very rare. I also manage the commercial waste in Derby, so it's a lot more. It happens a lot more in Derby than it is in Nottingham. So our statutory obligation is to collect once a week. And if management agencies want to step out of that, that's where the additional charge would entail. But that's only at the request of the management agency above the statutory obligation requirements of the City Council.
Thanks, Alvin. We've got another one here. Somebody asking for Broad Street, Old Lenton Street and High Cross Street to have a manual inspection as there's a large amount of litter and it's presenting a bad impression. Obviously, we can get back to people on that outside of the meeting. And then we've got one that's gone into the chat. If we can, everybody can try and put their questions in the Q&A, otherwise I'm in and out of the chat and the Q&A. So we've got one. Will the council be notifying all agents and landlords of the extra collection days so that we can notify the tenants?
Well, I assume that's for the. Sorry, Peter. Peter, you're on mute. He might be talking to someone. We have those scheduled in our planning, but what we didn't want to do is just have a mass exodus. So let me come back to, if you can give me the contact details, or if I can share that. I think it would be sensible to do, because there is a couple of additional days. But what I don't want to turn it into is a bring out your dead, because the resource won't be able to cope with that, because this is not a bring out your dead campaign, because it would have repercussions with elected members' decision. So there is additional resource in there because we anticipate the spike. But what we don't want to turn it into is a bring out your dead day. But I'll speak to colleagues and get back.
I think Alvin, just for that one, I think we're trying to use it flexibly rather than be rigid with it, and it's going to be kind of floating around to pick up stuff as it, not kind of as it happens, but a bit more organically, rather than saying we're going to do this here on a Wednesday, because you're right, we'll end up. It's a pilot, isn't it? So I don't want to be too rigid with any of these areas or days. It needs to be flexible for me. So if we're talking about that,
we do. Well, we split the zones. We split the area into zones, don't we? A, B, C, and D. And I've got it in front of me. And you know, there's clearly indications that Zone A will be on the 11th. Zone D will be on the 18th. Zone C will be on the 25th, and Zone D will be on the 2nd of July. And then on the 9th, they'll always float round. So you could put on, say, most Saturdays.
So we've got one more coming in. There's little confidence from block managers and landlords to engage in recycling bins because of the difficulties arising out of misuse. Is there a solution to encourage more recycling?
We have, sorry, I'm on my iPad, not my laptop today, but if I could send, we purchased, and we're happy to purchase for landlords and just pass on the cost. You know, we won't make any money for that. We have we have 1,100 bins with side windows. So obviously you can see the contamination inside, but more importantly, they've got restrictor plates on. So you can't really get your bag waste in. So cardboard will be flattened and goes through like a letterbox. And then it's got the aperture for a 2-litre bottle of Coke or something like that. That's what we roll out now. If people want recycling bins, that's what we roll out. If Nottingham City Homes, we've got many tenants up and down, that's what we signpost them to, and that's what we roll out. And we've had some really good results in terms of contamination, because of course, you know, it's one of my beer books in terms of, you know, we're not very high as a city in terms of our contamination rate. Sorry, our recycling rate. It's not helped with the fact that we don't have a sideways policy, because you're collecting more residual to calculate against the recycling. So yeah, I'm more than happy to get that that bin and show that and display that bin to landlords. And I'm happy to provide the cost. We're happy to take that, you know, and purchase that for you guys as well and install them.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap this session up there. Thanks very much, Alvin. That's really useful. And if you can provide some information about those recycling bins, and we can make sure that they're circulated afterwards, because that sounds really positive. So I'm going to pass on now to Ed Caswell from the HMO enforcement team. He's going to be talking about managing antisocial behaviour from tenants, including planning for end of term issues. So over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Victoria. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ed Caswell, and I'm the Principal Antisocial Behaviour and Housing Enforcement Officer at Nottingham City Council. And I manage a team that deals with and responds to reported incidents of antisocial behaviour. We ensure landlord compliance with the relevant licence conditions, and if necessary, we enforce these conditions. So we sit within the housing licensing compliance team, which was known as the HMO team, but we work across all 3 licensing schemes that are administered by Nottingham City Council. So I think it's important for us to perhaps define antisocial behaviour a little bit, because I'm sure you've probably heard of the term, but it's important for us to know exactly what we're dealing with. It's obviously an incredibly broad and complex issue that kind of can span on all sorts of different problems that we see in neighbourhoods, ranging from waste problems to obviously noisy neighbours, noise complaints, fly tipping and graffiti. But it can be broadly defined as activities carried out by occupiers or their guests which adversely impacts on the local community by being a source of nuisance, annoyance or distress. So again, it is a broad subject, but it can cause some serious distress to residents and to people who have to deal with problems caused by tenants. So today we're going to predominantly focus on, I'm going to focus on kind of noise nuisance issues and your traditional kind of domestic noise, and just explain a little bit about how you can deal with tenants if they are engaging in that sort of behaviour. Also, just to detail kind of what my team's purpose is and what we do. So the team works across all licensing schemes, and we respond to complaints around antisocial behaviour and waste, and we investigate breaches of the relevant licence conditions. So we are a dedicated resource to tackling antisocial behaviour issues. I think it really shows the authority's commitment to attempting to reduce antisocial behaviour that we now have this dedicated resource within housing licensing. And reduction of antisocial behaviour is obviously one of the key aims of the licensing schemes. We have developed a 3-stage escalation model for complaints over a 12-month period, which runs from September to September, to try and take into account our student residents, and also just to ensure the compliance with the licence, and to assist landlords as well. If you do have tenants engaging with antisocial behaviour, we're also here to assist you and to help you attempt to deal with those problems. Just a quick reminder around what the licence conditions are in relation to antisocial behaviour. So the predominant one that sits as a standard licence condition. So this condition is on all licences that we issue as an authority. So the licence holder shall ensure that all reasonable and practical steps are taken to prevent or reduce antisocial behaviour or criminality by the tenants of and visitors to the property. So the key wording there is that reasonable and practical steps that you take as a license holder, and we and I'll go into that a little bit more of kind of what we see that as. We also have a condition around having a written antisocial behaviour procedure. So this is the licence holder shall put in place written antisocial behaviour procedures detailing how complaints made to the licence holder will be dealt with, a copy of which shall be provided to the tenant in the information pack. The licence holder shall, within 28 days of any demand by the council, provide this in writing. So we like to see that when we're engaged in a case, we always ask landlords for a copy of their antisocial behaviour procedures. What this document should look like is it should be something that underpins and informs your response to complaints around antisocial behaviour if your tenants are engaging in anything. And it should be a kind of a stage plan of how you'll deal with tenants and detail how you would escalate problems, if problems continue, from complaints all the way through from when you're notified about or you're made aware of there being some problems, all the way through to the potential eviction action. I stress that this document shouldn't be something that you just write and put on the shelf. It should be a living, working document that you're always following, and that we encourage you to kind of learn from when you've had some positive success with tenants and kind of implement those procedures in and kind of it be an ever-evolving document. We have got an example of kind of what we consider to be best practice with this on our website. It's also in our antisocial behaviour guidance that we have available on the website, and I'll get Victoria to circulate with that at the end of the forum. So what are your responsibilities as a landlord? First and foremost, when it comes to your licence, we want to ensure that you're complying with your licence condition. So what this essentially means is that you are taking those reasonable and practical steps to try and reduce and mitigate any problems that tenants may be causing. I think it's my key piece of advice to landlords is to ensure that you understand your licence conditions. They're standardised, as I say, they're across all licenses, and that you just you ensure that you comply with that. If you don't understand them or you need any help or guidance, we're always here and available to kind of clarify anything that you might not quite understand. Something as well we want to see is that you proactively manage your tenants when you're aware that they're engaging in antisocial behaviour. So if you receive a notification from my team, the council authority, or any partner agencies like university or police, we just want to see that landlords are proactively engaging with us as an authority and explaining to us what steps they've taken, but also that you are speaking with your tenants. You don't just hear about something and just kind of forget about it. It's about speaking and opening up a dialogue with your tenants. And when you're made aware of any incidents, that you document your responses and what steps you've taken. And we want to see kind of that evidenced as well. We also want you to follow that antisocial behaviour policy that will underpin your response. Follow the steps and stages that you've set out in your policy. Begin the process, if necessary, of issuing written warnings, and ensure that you detail in your response and that you can evidence that to us as the authority. So what is reasonable and practical, and what do we kind of see that looking like, and how can you kind of positively engage with us and show that you're doing that? So we always ask that you encourage good neighbourly behaviour at the start and end of your tenancy. So when a tenancy is coming to an end, if you've got groups moving out, potentially having leaving parties, that you're encouraging that good neighbourly behaviour. But it's key to do that at the start of a tenancy as well. Ask your tenants to introduce themselves to their neighbours and kind of get on a first name basis. That can always promote a positive relationship. Provide your contact details to neighbours as well, so that you can get ahead of any issues, and that the neighbours can contact you if necessary, if they've got any problems with kind of the behaviour of your tenants. And it's also best practice to kind of issue some guidance around being a good neighbour, and continue to remind this throughout a tenancy if you're aware that your tenants are engaging in any behaviour. So if necessary, we want to see you enforcing the clauses within your tenancy agreements. I'm sure many of you will have good clauses within a tenancy agreement to tackle antisocial behaviour, just ensure that that's available. These terms should really make it quite clear that your tenants, if they do engage in antisocial behaviour, that this would be a breach of their tenancy agreement. So just remind them of that at the start of a tenancy. And if you need any help with that kind of clause and wording, again, we have that within our guidance that's available on our website. Also, when you're made aware of any issues or any parties, whatever it may be, any loud noise, investigate those allegations and speak with your neighbours, speak with the people who you feel may have made those complaints to us. And most importantly, speak with your tenants. We do appreciate that some people's kind of tolerance levels are a little bit lower, and some things may be unfounded. It might be a different address. So it's important that you speak with your tenants and you kind of get a handle of the situation and understand exactly what's happened. And as well, encourage and when you speak with your neighbours, where exactly to report these problems and signpost them to the relevant partners.
I've just 1 minute left, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So again, kind of what is reasonable and practical. So we want to see you put these issues that I've identified in writing. So again, this shows that you're just being proactive. Serve your stage warning letters as well. So remind them of the antisocial behaviour clause in their tenancy agreement, and ensure that these letters are detailed in your SB policy. Visit and speak with your tenants. So face-to-face conversations can go a long way. It sets out your expectations and reminds them of the consequences of continuing the behaviour. But again, document and be able to evidence this to us so we can ensure that you're complying with your conditions. In case of students, we've had some good results when landlords have written to guarantors. Very invariably that's a parent. So, if we can get parents involved and they're speaking with people who may be engaging in antisocial behaviour, that has a little bit more weight than perhaps somebody from an authority or from the university. And again, speak to partners. So speak with the universities and police if necessarily. Both universities have some really good established off-campus liaison teams who we work with very closely. I can put you in contact with them if necessary, and they can obviously remind university students of the code of behaviours. And we've developed really good, strong working links with them. So just very quickly, just about the planning for the end of term, just ensure that you speak with your tenants and aware when they're planning to leave. And again, just kind of discourage them around those end of term parties, those leaving parties. That's something that can get you ahead. And as well, discuss with your neighbours any problems when your tenant's planning to be leaving. And that's it. I rushed in that last minute. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. There's my email address if you want to contact me or have any questions or anything that you feel I can help you with. But thank you very much for your time.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ed. That's great. Thanks very much. Okay. So I'm going to pass on now, moving swiftly on to Gavin from the UK Revenue Protection Association. He's going to talk about bypass meters and practical advice in dealing with this issue.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you just give me a second, I'm just going to bring up my presentation. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. If you could put it on, oh, you've done it. Great. Thanks.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for inviting us along today. I'm here on behalf of the Uk Rpa, which is the UK Revenue Protection Association. My name is Gavin Strawn. I'm the Vice Chair of the Uk Rpa, but I also head up the business development side of a company called HACE, and we provide the revenue protection services to suppliers. So we are the people that go out and investigate suspected energy theft or tampered meters on behalf of suppliers. As I go through my slides and presentation, you'll see how the industry works and how you guys are all involved in this. So just a bit of background about the Uk Rpa. We've been going for 30 odd years. We're part of a multinational industry. This isn't a UK centric issue. This happens all over the globe in various different forms of meter tampering. And what the Uk Rpa do, and other associations around the world, is these are best practice forums. We're an association where like-minded individuals get together to discuss ideas. We share lots of war stories, and if I had longer than 20 minutes today, I could probably keep talking about this for about 3 hours, of all the different things that we find out there on the street. So we are competitors, and we have suppliers sit around the same table, which is rare because they are competitors, and we are competitors in the revenue protection industry as well as service providers. But it's all with one common goal, and that is to reduce the amount of theft and make the world a safer place. The revenue protection, the suppliers see it as that because it's protecting their revenue at the end of the day. But from when we are service providers, we concentrate mainly on the safety. I do have a couple of pictures coming up of some meters, and maybe some of you have come across these meters in the past. We as service providers aren't always interested in protecting the revenue of the supplier. What we are interested in is the safety of the individuals in the property and the neighbouring properties, because there is no safe way to tamper with your meter. So for the last 100 years, we've had meters in our property. These are to ensure that what we use, we pay for. And in the minute you put something to measure into people's homes and things, as soon as you try and take money, people will always try and find a way of getting out of paying, should I say, and bypassing them. It is a criminal offence. However, it is extremely difficult to prosecute on the theft of gas or the extraction of electricity on its own, because that's down to the burden of proof, especially when you have HMOs. You have people that are transient between properties and don't put their name to the account. People say they had a party at New Year's and they didn't realise somebody had done it. It's the burden of proof is quite difficult to do, but you may have seen recent press stories. There was the young boy that died at the pub where his granddad had been tampering with the meter, and it caused a fire. Only when something catastrophic happens do the police stand up and take note. Now, this leaves us with a bit of an issue, and that is the value of theft and what it's costing us as individuals. You know, I appreciate it here from a landlord's perspective. We will come on to those meters in a minute, but if I want to put this down to us as individuals, around 2017, 2018, there was a study done, and it says on there between 100 and 400 million pounds worth of energy was being stolen from meter points across the UK. And since then, as an industry, we tend to quote a figure between 400 and 500 million pounds, because that's where we believed it to be at. If we take into consideration the price increases that we are currently undergoing, we are currently paying 100% more than what we were in 2019. So if we do not believe that theft has actually increased on the amount of times theft has been done, then we are talking about a £1 billion industry here. If we then try and factor in the fuel crisis that we're currently going under, the cost of living crisis that we are undergoing, and people in fuel poverty and desperation, do we think that more people are stealing? So where does that figure sit now? Is it 1.2 billion? Is it 1.5 billion? I don't know. What I would say is keep an eye on the press, because we are conducting the survey at the moment from Capgemini, who will be publishing shortly what they believe to be the new estimate that's being stolen. And we are going to be relying on people like you as landlords to be able to help report these instances. Over the last few years, we've seen a reduction in the amount of leads that are coming in due to the amount of visits that suppliers were making to people's homes. So historically, we had a lot of people knocking on your doors to get meter reads, and they were identifying issues then. As we now have smart meters, the amount of interaction, physical interaction between suppliers and the meters is reducing. So we are reliant on people like yourselves. If you look at this little graphic here, it tells you where we get our leads from mainly. And we get them from all over the place. And I think you'd probably fall under the housing associations band at the bottom there. But they can, what we're saying is they can come from anywhere, but we do rely on people reporting it, as well as suppliers being able to do their own data analysis to identify the thefts. So what do you do if you believe there is been a theft at one of your properties, or you believe it's happening somewhere? The first thing I would say is, and it's written in red for a reason here, is do not touch it. I do have some examples coming up in a second, and probably a good time to say that this presentation I'm doing to you now normally lasts about an hour to an hour and a half. I've cut out a lot of the images, and it tends to be done in smaller groups between 5 and 20, where it's more interactive. So I put a lot of pictures up, and I talk through the individual pictures to show what to look for. Time today means I've only got a couple to go through. So if anybody does want any further training, we do offer this, and please reach out to the Uk Rpa, and we'll be happy to provide that, particularly for councils, for maintenance workers, people doing housing inspections, etc. So first thing, do not touch it. There is no safe way of doing it, and if you have an electric meter that's been bypassed, it's highly likely there's exposed copper, and that exposed copper will give you a hell of a nasty shock if you touch it or cause a fire. If you can obtain a photograph, that's brilliant, but try not to let the person or the tenant know that you've identified it. We don't want them doing two things, well, the same thing, removing the evidence. One, it can make it a little bit harder to prove. However, you'll see from the pictures in a second, once you've done it, it's hard to cover it up. But a lot of people who tamper with their meter or have a tampered meter don't tamper with it themselves. If you go down to your local pub and start talking to people, there's always somebody there that will do a job for 30, 40 pounds. And we're seeing a huge increase at the moment on social media of people claiming that you don't need to have an electric or gas meter, that you can purchase it wholesale off National Grid and to go and fit your own meter. And it's become a bit of a worry, because these are not, I'm going to be careful here, these are not down and out, they're not people on maybe dependency on drug or alcohol who are desperate. These are, you know, regular folk who believe that what they're reading is true. It's like the fake news of the 5G mass during COVID and all that kind of thing. They're believing that this is a true thing. So they're employing people, and there are people on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok offering their services to have this done, and people think it is legitimate. So what you don't want is this non-necessarily trained person trying to remove the evidence, because that is where they're more likely to receive a shock or start a fire. So if you see anything, don't touch it. Please try and get a photograph if you can. Try and get a meter read at the same time. Not entirely important, but the serial number may be pretty good to have. Get out of there and report it to one of the two avenues you see on your screen here. We've got the Energy Stay Safe and the Uk Rpa, which is where I'm from. Completely independent from any supplier, and they will find out who the supplier is and report it to them instantly. If it's a definite confirmed tamper, we categorise the job as a category A. There are three categorisations. There's your A, B's and C's. A's are competent person has witnessed the theft or the tamper, and we consider landlords to be competent people when looking at their properties. So if you get that photograph and you report it, it'll be dealt with as a category A job, and suppliers have to resolve that within 21 days. They actually have to visit the property within 24 hours. So we can turn these jobs around quickly to ensure that you can then continue to rent out the properties. If you don't have the evidence and you just suspect it, the SLA in the industry for that would be a category B, and that would mean that as a service provider, we've got 40 days to complete the works of that property. So it takes a bit longer. And the last thing we want, and we do get quite a lot of landlords contacting us, say, I want to let my property back out. I realised my tenants did this before, can you come round? So when you report it, you can leave your contact details and ask for the revenue protection service provider for that particular supplier to contact you to arrange access if your tenants, etc., have moved out. Just very briefly, and I am conscious of time, when you're looking at an electric meter, this is a common setup. There are no two meter points the same, because they have their little nuances, but fundamentally what you have is if I go by the boxes, the coloured boxes that are around the equipment, the bottom left-hand side is where is your cutout or the main fuse coming into your property. We all have one of these in our properties or outside the properties, and this is the main cable that comes in from the street carrying the load. The next orange box to the left of that, or above it, shall I say, are your tails going into the meter. This is where your first little visual inspection can happen. They should be two tails, as we call them, going directly into the meter. There should be no copper showing, there should be no damage to these, and they should be in great condition. The meter itself then in the yellow box, we know varies depending on make, manufacturer, whether it be a smart meter or key meter, but they're all roughly the same. They're white or grey, or they're all black spinny disc ones, if you like, and they should have 2 wires coming back out, which is the next orange box. And now we've got an isolation switch here. Now in a lot of rental properties, isolation switches are fit, so you can do maintenance on the properties, but a lot of the time those tails go directly into a consumer unit. At no point during that, in that picture, should there be any copper showing. There shouldn't really be any extra wires. And on the meter and the cutout itself, they should have little wire ferrules that are sealing that equipment. When you have your EICRs and your electricity inspections done, the electrician will glance his eye over this, but if he spots anything wrong with this equipment, he mustn't touch it. It is down to the supplier or the network operator to come and work on these points. And that's another key one, is we have had electricians tell landlords, electricians tell us, and electricians tell themselves that they can rectify situations at the meter point. They can't. Anything beyond between the cutout and the meter is the responsibility of the supplier, and the supplier only. This is probably the most common thing you will see when it comes to a bypass electricity meter. Now, the electricity, I don't know if you can see my mouse now, off the cutout here, what you've got is the power coming out here, so that's the secondary fuse the side here, into the meter. And what happens is it comes in through this wire, goes around the meter, and then back out this red wire here to the consumer unit. Electricity is lazy, it's very human-like. It'll take the path of least resistance. So what's happened here is somebody has taken an earth wire and shoved it, for better choice for better words, into the terminal where the electricity is coming into the meter and where it's coming out. So the electricity is coming up this wire and it's getting to this point and saying to itself, do I want to bother going around all this mechanism and back out here, or shall I just take the path of least resistance, which is this wire here, and then it shoots down the red wire, thus bypassing the meter. This person is getting free electricity. It's as simple as that. Now, we have exposed parts here. This is exposed copper. So you touch that and you're likely to lose an arm, or if not your life, or at least start a fire. This is how dangerous this is. So if you see anything, there are other telltale signs on here as well, such as the seal is missing on the meter, and also that meter terminal cover is actually upside down. But they're little things that we wouldn't expect always for you to spot. Again, same thing here on the left-hand side. And this one, you can see this meter starting to burn. And that is, if you look at the size of these tails that go in and out of the meter, they're normally 16mm tails. They're the ones designed to carry that amount of load. The person here has decided to use some 2mm wire to bypass. It's not designed to carry the amount of load that they're consuming at that property. So you can see this screw hole here is already blackened out, where they've moved their wires from this one to the one above, because they've actually melted the meter, because the wires are actually melting. And a lot of the time you'll see these wires are hidden behind the terminal cover. So the only telltale sign you've got is the fact that this seal is missing. So if your seals are missing on any of the equipment, please report it to your supplier. The one on the right is a little bit more elaborate, or a little bit harder to spot. But again, conscious of time, what you've got is this brown wire here, and that is coming direct from the cutout into the consumer unit. And that means it's just completely bypassing the meter out. Meter's not doing anything because the electricity is coming through that wire into the cutout. More importantly, as landlords, I'm sure you're aware that more dangerous, well, not more dangerous, as equally as dangerous is the fact that the consumer unit is missing its cover, and you've got exposed parts anyway. So you'd want to be looking into this property yourself.
I mean, we've got 3 minutes left, and I'm sure there might be a question or two. So
yeah, no problem at all.
Great.
Gas is are less visual tampers. One of the biggest ones is on a gas meter, and this is a key meter example. When it gets down to 0, it goes into your £5 emergency credit. After that, it switches itself off. So once it says off, there should be no gas passing through that meter. This meter's still got gas passing through, because this meter, the person owes £7,266.44. And the way that has happened is, when it's clicked over, the valve is clicked over, they've taken the meter off the wall. It is just a plastic valve inside the meter. You can turn the ECV off, take the meter off the wall, use a Bic biro, pair of scissors, screwdriver, poke the valve, it'll break the valve, put the meter back on the wall again, and it'll pass gas. It's as simple as that. They are less visual. So here, what you're looking for is, does the meter say off? Ask if you can wash your hands, because if you can wash your hands with warm water, they're getting gas from somewhere. If they've got a gas boiler, that's an indication that the meter's been tampered with or it's gone faulty at least. So report those. So you'd be glad to know, Victoria, this is my last slide. I'm just going to leave that there for people to jot down the contact details, and just want to pass on the same message again. Please don't touch any bypass meters. Try and obtain a photograph, because it will move it up the scale from category B to category A, and you get a quicker response. And please report it to, if you know the supplier, by all means report it direct to the supplier, but if not, report it to one of these agencies here, and we'll go out and investigate and provide for you. Thank you for your time, and obviously happy to field any questions.
Great, thanks very much, Gavin. We do have one question in the Q&A. If you could unshare your slides, that would be...
Oh, absolutely.
So the question is, we have an issue with teenagers punching through meter boxes and turning off the supply. Providers no longer replace them, but handymen cannot replace without disconnecting the meter, which they are not allowed to do. So any advice would be welcome.
Okay, I'm just going to read that again, if that's okay, Sophia, because I was just getting rid of my screen. So when teenagers punching through meter boxes and turning off the supply, providers no longer replace them, but handyman can replace that, disconnect the meter, which we're not actually correct, yeah, because they have to move the meter. Any advice would be welcome. I think this touches a little bit on the previous gentleman. This is a bit of a police matter as well with regards to unsocial behaviour, I would say. If it depends where the meters are and in what kind of circumstance, but you could always try ringing the network operator, which is 105 from your mobile phones in wherever you're in the UK. I believe you're probably in Western Powers area. They may be able to help. If it's in flats, then it would be the BNO's responsibility, which is the network operator of the building, rather than the network operator in the street. But other than that, if the suppliers are not prepared to replace them, it's working with the DNOs to see if they can do anything. If they're not key meters, you may be able to get them put into a more secure metal surround. They look like little substations. But again, that is a DNO activity, because you'd have to turn it off in the street to make that change. I can see the other question. Would you like me to answer that one as well? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so surely the suppliers know, because usage is suddenly reduced from the previous bill. Yes, it is a key indicator. I've got to be careful I don't talk on behalf of all suppliers, because they all do their own things with regards to data. But yes, you've got key usage, for example, all of a sudden stops. People stop topping up a key, and you've got usage that goes down dramatically. They are indicators that there is something wrong, but there's a fine balance in finding these. For example, here, my gas usage has gone to zero, because I politely told the family, you're not using the heating now because it's warm enough, stop it, and everything's turned off. So my gas usage has gone down. The electric, and I'm very polite when I say it, and things like that. But we have a lot of people who move around. We have a lot of people with second homes, and we have a lot of people who work away from home. So they may work in the holiday industry, and that's another touchy subject at the moment. But if you've got something on cabin crew, you might be away for 3 or 4 weeks. We have people who work on oil rigs. We have people who move around. So it is difficult to go by usage. You can make a dramatic decrease in your home just by turning things off. And, we have struck a balance at home here. We don't have the heating, but hot tub can stay for now. But we could make quite a significant difference by turning that off. So usage, yes, it is a metric that is used, but it isn't as simple as black and white of, all right, so that one's gone down, they must be stealing. And when it comes to getting entry into these properties, if we don't get in through the normal knocking of the door, then we have rights of entry by using warrants and breaking in. And we don't want to be breaking into people's houses when there's no need. So we need something else other than a bit of data.
Okay, thank you very much, Gavin. That was really interesting, and some good pictures for us that I found really interesting to look at. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So I'm going to pass us on now to Teresa from the NRLA, who's going to give us an update on some legal changes.
Hi. Just took my blanket off. I haven't got my heating on either. Right, I'm just going to sort out sharing my screen. Bear with me a second. Okay, so yes, I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. Going to do a quick update. I'm impressed with the timing so far of the meeting. We're practically keeping to time, which is that's some feat, Victoria. So I shall wait to be booted off if I extend my welcome. So yes, I'm briefly covering today Renters Reform Bill. That topic is back on the agenda. I think I've been talking about this for years now, but it's reared its head again today. An update on carbon monoxide and smoke alarms, right to rent, and then just talk about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency again, yeah. So the Renters Reform Bill. Basically, we are still waiting for a white paper to be published from the government, but they have stated that they're committed to bringing this forward into parliamentary session in this year. So we shall wait and see. But as a refresher to those of you who are familiar with this is what they are planning to bring in. They want to remove the section 21, which is the no fault route to possession for landlords. With that, landlords would have to use a section 8 to gain possession. So the possession grounds will be made stronger and some new ones will be added. And that will be predominantly to address repeated rent arrears and to shorten antisocial behaviour notice periods. They'll also be applying a decent home standards to the private rental sector. Not that it will have an impact on the people who are in on this call. I mean, the decent home standards has predominantly applied to the social sector. So, it's highly likely that your property is well and above that standard. A new ombudsman is to be introduced for dispute resolution, and a new property portal to help landlords understand obligations and for tenants to understand and see compliance information and support local authority enforcement. But we've already ticked the box by being in on these types of forums, so we're already involved in that. So to give you an idea of the process, it just get a view as to how long is this going to take to get through to the final end game. So I'll leave you to decide, and maybe we could start a bit of a betting in the chat box. How long you think this is gonna take. I'm sorry there are no prizes, but yeah, have a guess. So we're already past the first box, the Queen's Speech. We've gone past that. The white paper, well, that was due to be published spring 2022. So we're already out of sync with that. So that's where they're going to outline the proposals. But it's not a final decision. So I'm not going to go through all the boxes, but basically, once the white paper is published, it then needs to go to further consultation and stakeholder engagement. And then it's batted over to government, where it goes through the Commons, the Lords, and it goes backwards and forwards with amendments. And once everything's tweaked to perfection, apparently, it will then go for royal assent, where it's given royal assent with an implementation date. And then the government at that stage will give a transition period for us landlords to be aware of when it's exactly starting. So it's supposed to be this year, but we'll see. But anyway, it's on your radar that it's back on as a hot topic with the government. So what are the NRLA doing with this? Well, we work very closely with central government, and with feedback from our members, we've outlined, what we would like to see, as if a shadow paper, if you will, to theirs. So we're seeking clear and comprehensive grounds for possession. So anybody going through or has gone through possession will know how absolutely dreadful and unclear it is. And improved access to dispute resolution. So, where we have got rent arrears and ASB, so we've got access to get this, sorted out and, help, because it's not always easy to directly communicate with your tenant if communication's broken down. As the government have proposed a redress scheme, and the NRLA suggesting that we can improve compliance by linking each landlord to the unique property reference number. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but each property across the land has got a UPRN. So we are suggesting, well, shall we just make use of this and attach like compliance certificates to that reference number. We're looking for a review on enforcement and better funding from central government for local authorities to tackle bad practice. Because of, our view is that if councils have the funding to work through the legislation that's already in place, then they will be able to carry out enforcement more efficiently. The government have also proposed lifetime deposits, which that is a new concept. And what we're asking for is that the system, it just doesn't discourage landlords from making valid claims. So we don't want it to be a system that is clunky and it's not workable for landlords, and it deters landlords from seeking claims for damage to properties. So yeah, visit the NRLA if you want to see a bit more on that from us. So moving on to smoke and carbon alarms, the government have published basically a draft legislation, which from the 1st of October, they are saying that carbon monoxide alarms will be required in all rooms with a combustible fuel appliance, which excludes gas cookers. So with the current legislation, we've got CO alarms where there's a solid fuel burning appliance. So this is an addition now where it's got to be rooms with a combustible fuel appliance. And it is interesting that they've excluded gas cookers, but I'm sure the majority of people in on this call have probably taken NRLA and Dash's advice to, just to pop a CO alarm in anyway if you've got a gas boiler. They're saying it's the landlord's responsibility now to repair smoke and carbon alarms once the tenant has reported a fault, because the existing legislation stating that, once you've signed over tenancy to your tenants, that they are, once the alarms are working, and then from there onwards, it's for them to manage and maintain, which doesn't quite make sense, because there's not much incentive for a tenant to sort out an alarm. So I'm sure the majority of people on this call have been doing that anyway, sorting out faulty alarms. But anyway, it's definitely, it's going to be actually laid out in the legislation. Currently, the alarms are not specified as to whether they need to be battery or hardwired, but please bear in mind that the councils, if you're inspected by the councils or you're a part of an accreditation scheme like with Dash, the HHSRS is adopted to assess the property, which will expect to have mains wired interlinked smoke alarms in the property. So there is obviously there's a difference there between what the government are laying out and the HHSRS. So please bear that in mind. And also that basically a mains wired is more reliable system. It is better to go that way as opposed to battery ones which can fail and be tampered with. Moving on to the right to rent. So the government has extended the temporary adjustment to right to rent checks that were introduced due to COVID, and they've extended that till the 30th of September this year. And that is relating to the checks, the online checks that you can do for the required documentation. So you don't have to do in-person checks, you can carry on doing them online up until the 30th of September. But as you will see from the next bullet points, the government is paving the way forward for a more digital system. So from the 6th of April this year, they're saying that checks can be conducted using certified service providers. This is where tenants are not eligible for the Home Office online services. So if you've got tenants who are on, let's say, pre-settled status, or have got visas, and you can do the Home Office checks. But what they're saying is that certified service providers will be able to do digital checks on British and Irish citizens. Now, if you go to the government website and read up on this, there's just only a couple of service providers that are currently listed there that you can use. But interestingly, you know, landlords or letting agents can apply to be certified service providers as well. So if you weren't aware of that, yeah, you can do a bit more digging on the government website. And then following on from the digital theme, if you've got a tenant who's got a biometric card, then you won't be able to do any physical checks with them anymore. It has to be purely digital. And just confirming as well with regard to these adjusted checks, the government will not be expecting to do any sort of retrospective checks once they, if they do lift this method. I mean, I just don't think it's going away, actually, because it has been really a convenient way to carry out these right to rent checks. I mean, the whole thing with this, it just sounds straightforward, but if you're not, it's not something that we do all the time. If you've got long-term tenants, for example, then it's not a process you're familiar with. So just every time you need to get some new tenants in and you're doing the checks, just go to the government website, check on the documentation, and just basically find out what is the most latest procedure that's being followed. Yes, we've got a win here with some NRLA campaigning. This is to do with the energy efficiency measures. We've actually managed to gain a success with some zero rated VAT on eligible energy saving measures. So that is good news. So any eligible measures made from April 2022 until March 31st of March 2027, you'll be able to claim zero rated VAT. So what are these measures? Well, if you install controls for central heating and hot water systems, they're eligible. Draft strips, insulation, solar panels, ground and earth source heat pumps, micro combined heat and power units, I've no idea what they are, wood fueled boilers, wind and water turbines. So yeah, keep all your receipts for those, because you'll be able to claim the VAT on them. So that's great news. Moving on to, yeah, that was the good news. This is a bad news slide. As we all know, the cost of energy is going up. This is going to be like a massive problem in the rental sector, both with tenants not being able to afford to pay bills, which will potentially have a knock-on effect with paying rent. And, you know, for those landlords who've got all-inclusive rents where they are actually paying the bills as well. So yeah, massive impact, and we're yet to see the fallout of that. The government has, you know, they've introduced some energy bill rebates, which, you know, when you look at them, they're not really that impactful. There's a £200 one-off discount on energy bills, which does actually have to be repaid over 5 years. And for those who have been eligible for council tax rebate, likely have received a letter from the council with regard to that. Needless to say, if you believe that your tenants are going to be struggling, then you can point them to the council. Perhaps they could be eligible for the discretionary funds that the councils have. They do have a small pot which they might be able to access. I would say, you know, it's a time more than any that, you know, we need to keep in contact with our tenants and just, you know, just see. I mean, you don't want to be obviously prying with them, but it's good to have some sort of idea, you know, how they are getting on financially. You know, have they lost work? Are they in work? You know, things like that. And just to add on some more depressing news, Michael Gove has recently confirmed that only occupants will be eligible for council tax. So landlords who pay for council tax and the tenants in those properties aren't eligible. So yeah, it's not good news on the energy front there. This is a reminder on the proposed minimum energy efficiency changes, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but just to recap that the government are planning to increase the rating to a C for new tenancies from 2025. If you need to make improvements to your property and it costs beyond £10,000, because there's a cost cap there, then you may be able to claim an exemption. And the idea is that you look at the fabric of the property first before introducing low carbon heating. I would just briefly say, just going back quickly, this has not been confirmed, and also some landlords are getting into a bit of a tiz about it, because it's, for a lot of properties, it's going to be difficult to go from, you know, maybe from a D perhaps to a C. Maybe they've made all the improvements and they can't get to a C. What I would reiterate is that the government have not decided, you know, which way they're going with this at the moment. So I would say hold fire and don't panic. Currently, there is some funding available. Just in case you weren't aware, there's some funding for electrical vehicle charging points. There's boiler upgrade scheme, applications have opened for that, so you can look at the government website for more information on that. The local authority, they have grants that's predominantly for low-income households. Also, if the overall income of the household is 30,000 and less, you know, you might be able to access the grants that are available from the council. So please do contact them if you have got a low-income household. Just to finalise my presentation, if you're not a member of the NRLA, there are many member benefits, couldn't say that properly. As well as landlord advice, you can tap into all the documentation. So this is where it was mentioned earlier about tenancy agreements. You know, you can get a really good, robust tenancy agreement, which you can use in your properties. There's lots of discounted services, which I suppose you would expect from a large organisation. And the membership is £85 a year for up to 2 people and £175 up to 5 people. And you can get a discount using that code. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. That's great. We've got lots of different questions and comments coming through on the Q&A and the chat. Sophia, I don't know if you want to pick out some of the best ones, or
I can do. I was just waiting to check if you were going to drive us on because of the time.
Should we take 2 minutes for some quick questions, and then we'll have the full break slightly.
So in relation to that discount that we were talking about, hasn't the position changed on the discount? Somebody's saying they thought it's now 400 and wouldn't have to be paid back.
The utilities, the energy one.
I believe so, yeah.
No, I mean, my understanding was that it needed to be paid back. Yes, I don't know where they got that information
we
from.
can go away and try and find out about that and put it into the newsletter, Teresa, if you're not.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it, just to clarify that.
Give you another one. If a landlord wants to stop letting a property after this proposed bill is in place, will this be covered by the Section 8 rather than the Section 21?
Yeah, there will be. I'm pretty sure there will be a clause in there to protect landlords who want to exit the business. Yeah, because you need to be able to exit and reclaim possession back of your property. So selling will likely be a clause in there.
There'll be a lead-in period as well, I assume, Teresa.
Mm.
Okay. Is there maybe one more question, and then we'll
somebody's asking if your presentation can be made available after the session.
Yeah, I've sent a copy to Victoria.
Great, thank you. Do you want any more, Victoria?
No,
do you want to press on?
Yeah, shall we, where are we? I think we've got some time now for a break, haven't we? We've put in the agenda. So we're running 2 minutes behind schedule. So if we can take the break and be back just at just before 3 o'clock, that would be great, and we'll get restarted just before 3. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Victoria.
Right, okay, I think we've had 5 minutes there. So if we can get started, if people are still there. Great. Okay. Oh, Linda's still there, good. Right, I'm going to I'll hand over to Matt and Linda from Dash, and they're going to give us an update on what's been happening at Unipol Student Homes and Dash. So I'll hand over to both of you.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Hello. Can everyone see the presentation there?
We can, yeah.
Can you just make it a bit bigger?
Put it on presenter mode.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Hi guys, well I'm Linda Selby-Cobb from Dash. Looking down the participants list, I can see lots of familiar names. I would say faces, but I can't see any of you. It's like preaching out. Matt and I are here just to give you a very quick update on what we've been up to for your accreditation in the city. Shall we go on to the next slide, Matt? Right, so, oh, have we gone two? Two, or have we gone one? Is that the next one?
That's the first one I've got,
Well,
yeah.
that's okay. So I know there was a lot of talk regarding the Nottingham Standard and what it is. Most of you know now, in order to get the Nottingham Standard, there are 2 routes in, which is either via Dash, or 3 routes actually, either via Dash, landlord accreditation, via Unipol, or by the national code for your blocks. And for that, landlords do pay a reduced fee. Currently, the selective licence fee for accredited landlord is £670, which is a reduction of £220 per property, plus the one-off saving of the £85 for the training, which is included in the Dash accreditation. That I have had a sneaky look at Dave's presentation, but don't tell him that will be reduced slightly, but I won't steal his thunder and he can tell you about that. And the HMO licensing for accredited landlords is £990, which is a £340 reduction for accredited landlord. So as well as those financial benefits of accreditation, there are obviously lots of other benefits as well, which is the training, guidance, help and advice, etc. So, you know, we have landlords ring in terms of, you know, got a problem with this, got a problem with that, and students are the same via Unipol. So we've got that. We've got documents on our website as well, which landlords use. I won't lie, most people do come to us for the reduced fee. But what they do say is when they have got that, oh right, okay, when I needed you, it was really good to have somebody to chat to, and really do benefit the inspection element of the accreditation process as well, especially in light of the Fitness for Human Habitation Act that came in. So it's given landlords a little bit more confidence that somebody's been in and showed them what we would be looking for in a friendly sort of non-enforcement setting, and they've been able to pick up some tips, etc., for looking at the rest of their portfolio. I've put, just back on that side a sec, I did put a link there to the fees structure. I really advise all landlords to have a look at that, this fee structure policy for Nottingham City Council, because that will get through to all of the bones about what ifs, etc., and how they've set the discounting. Oh, not discounting, reduced licence fee. We're not calling it discounting. Okay, next slide. So who's accredited in Nottingham? So Dash have got 1,471 members as of this morning when I sent them over to Matt, 250 for Unipol and 37 providers in the national code. So we've got a lot of landlords in the area. When you look at properties, you know, over 8,000 properties belonging to landlords have applied for accreditation, and that's 35,000 bed spaces, which is a lot. It's still not everybody, so we are only looking at a proportion of the market. So there are lots out there. So we are, you know, on here we are preaching to be converted, but you are, you know, you are in good numbers. You are in good company.
Okay, yeah, I'm Matt Allison, and I work at Unipol, administering the code for shared student housing. but we also run the national code at Unipol as well for purpose-built student accommodation. So in terms of the shared student housing and the accreditation, on that side, Unipol do inspect 20% of every member's properties, and Dash inspect 10% of their members' properties. Obviously, they've got a lot more properties to look at there, so that's a lot of inspections going on in the city. The inspections are there obviously to check that that members are meeting our standard. We've both got a code of standards which is available online, but also to give some professional property assessment and advice. The people who are doing the inspections have good experience in working and inspecting properties with local authorities and accreditation schemes, and are very good at giving advice. And it is about also speaking to landlords as well and just giving general advice and updates on things that are going on in the city and in the sector. So it's not just kind of coming out and saying it does or it doesn't meet the standard. There's a full report that you get as well, and lots of landlords and members, as Linda mentioned, have said that that's been really useful. We both are voluntary, so you don't have to be accredited, and obviously when we come out, if there is any work to do to meet the standard or to come up to work required to meet legislation and regulation in the local area, we would resolve that informally. So we're not there to enforce things and to sort of stamp our feet if there are issues. You know, we do come out and work with people, and we're all kind of about improving properties and bringing things up to standard if they need to be any work doing. So I've just put together there a table of hazards which we've identified. There's a column there for Unipol and a column for Dash, and you can see there the far and away the most common issues that we come across are fire safety hazards. And that's understandable, I think, because there's a lot to take into consideration. It's constantly changing, there are updates. We were looking at that with Teresa earlier, you know, the regulations are changing all of the time and there are lots of things to keep up with. So our guides and inspections are hopefully helpful in those situations, and we can work with landlords and agents to assess properties and work out how we can resolve those hazards. So just a little bit about things that have been going on really recently and what we've been up to. So we're actually renewing the Nottingham Standard webpage. So members of Dash and Unipol are automatically ported into the Nottingham Standard, and that's what Nottingham City Council acknowledge and why people get the reduced licence fees. We work with Nottingham City Council, Dash and Unipol, of course, together, and we're updating that page. So it's going to be a central hub when it's relaunched, which should have loads of really interesting information on. It should be a central point there that people can come to and look at things that specifically with us, you know, about student accommodation. Dash, of course, you know, cover everything, professional lets. So that should be a really good, useful page, I think, when it's launched, and obviously we'll circulate that to everybody when that's ready to go. We regularly meet up, Dash, Nottingham City Council and ourselves, and we look at sort of common issues, things that we're dealing with, things that are coming up that might be of interest, and we are keen to try and make ourselves, you know, kind of share issues. And what's the word I'm looking for? Consistency is the word I'm looking for, to try and encourage more consistency and a consistent approach in the way that we all work. There are obviously slight differences in kind of you know, where we specialise and the way that we operate, but we do want to be consistent and work together. We also take part in the landlord and managing agent liaison group, so both Dash and Unipol have voice there. We attend those and are there if anyone has any questions or, you know, wants any advice on anything. I noticed a few questions about sort of boots on the street around sort of tenancy changeover for students in September. We do an annual garden survey in student areas, Unipol. Last year we went around Beeston, Dunkirk and Lenton, and we did about 150 properties in total, and a lot of local MPs and councillors are part of that as well. We obviously write to all of our members who have properties in the area before we do that, and let you know when we'll be coming, and we'd write to members afterwards as well, and pass on any comments that were made. So we do things like that in the area. We've got lots of training and briefings available. Linda will be able to give you an update on some of the Dash things. I just picked out a few of the things that we've had recently and some of the things coming up. So we've covered things to do with antisocial behaviour, mental health first aid, setting up a complaints process, using customer feedback to improve services, fire safety training, assessing fire safety hazards. And then we've got lots of things online specifically about, tenancy changeover, student antisocial behaviour, living in local areas and things. So there's a wealth of information online, and a lot of free training for our members as well. But there's lots of stuff there that you don't have to be a member to access. So even if you're not a student landlord, or you're not looking to be accredited, by all means have a look. Dash also have a library of really interesting information and lots of guides and links to legislation. So so we're really here as a point of contact, for questions and to help and support. And there's lots of things online as well, and lots of free things for accredited members, which is always a bonus. I'll pass over to Linda, because Dash are in the midst of a review and looking to recruit people.
Yeah, recruitment post. So we've just done a review ahead of our scheme manual, which is also due a review within the next 12 months. So the review was looking at the way in which making it a little bit more transparent, really, in terms of if a landlord doesn't agree with what we've said, and making that a little bit more clear for landlords, because that was something that came up that said, what happens if I don't agree with your report, etc. So we do have a committee of management set up, and we are looking to recruit another landlord onto that. So to balance it out a bit, as it's been pointed out, that might help in the future to get more people around the table. So if you would like to sit on that, please do email me expressions of interest, linda.cobb@derby.gov.uk, and we can have a chat about that. So yeah, that's my plug. So yeah, there they are. Yeah, there are our contact details. Are we ahead of time, Victoria? How are we doing?
You are, yes, that's excellent. We finished slightly early. So does anybody have any questions or anything for Matt or Linda that they want to? If you could unshare your slides, that'd be great.
I did see a question in the chat box about, it was just basically just a bit, probably sounded like a little bit of a frustration about, I manage a really, I've got a lovely property. It's managed by one of the top agents in the city, but they don't qualify for a reduced licence fee. They can't be accredited. They can be accredited, but the landlord themselves would have to apply for the accreditation. And the way I was told from Nottingham City is that's because the book ultimately stops with the landlord. So the landlord has the ultimate responsibility of a property, not the agent. So the agent will do all they can, but if the licence is in the landlord's name, then it will be the landlord that ultimately needs to have the accreditation, because they need to know the rules, etc., to manage the relationship of the managing agent, to make sure that they are doing a good job and working on their behalf. So I hope that sort of makes sense. Any more?
And we have somebody volunteering to be on the Dash panel as well.
S. Sandu. Just popped up. Yeah. So it's horrible not seeing the faces. So yeah.
Yes, no, it would be nice to be able to see people's faces, and maybe next time we'll look at that.
I reckon we'll be back face to face soon.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that would be really great to have everybody in a room together. If we don't have any more questions or comments, then what I'll do is I'll pass over to David Hobbs, who's going to talk about the consultation on selective licensing, because I'm sure we can. There'll be questions and conversation at the end.
No, definitely not. It's after an early finish.
So I'll hand over to David. Thanks very much. Thanks, Linda and Matt.
Great. Thank you, Victoria, and hopefully you can see my screen. I'll just run through a few slides and then hopefully some questions and a link to the survey as part of the consultation if you've not already had your say on the proposals. So yeah, my name is David Hobbs. I'm the Selective Licensing Manager, and I'm here to talk about the consultation for a new scheme of selective licensing. So what is selective licensing? For those that don't know, hopefully you do if you're in the scheme or you're a landlord in Nottingham. It requires all landlords to license their properties within a selected area of the city. And for selective licensing, that's for single occupancy properties or two people sharing. And it's a regulatory function within the Housing Act 2004, and it allows the council to license properties and make sure that they meet certain conditions, and also that they manage properties well, and that the landlord and manager are fit and proper persons. Excuse me. And within Nottingham, if you don't know, again, we've got three types of licensing schemes. We've got mandatory licensing of HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, which covers 5 people sharing in 2 or more households. And we also have a scheme of additional licensing, which is for 3 or 4 occupants in a shared property, a HMO as well. And we've got selective licensing. And selective licensing is the one that I'm here to talk about. This current scheme ends next July 2023. And so to go through the process of a second scheme, the council has done a lot of work. We have to do the same amount of work that we did for the first scheme in terms of providing that evidence base and pulling together a review of what we've done already, and also reasons why we believe the scheme needs to carry on in some shape or form. We can't just renew it. We can't just carry on doing what we're doing. It's a 5-year scheme, and so it ends next summer. And so why is the council considering this? So the council still believes that within the Housing Act, there's still problems within the sector. And this is the criteria under the Housing Act that the government requires us to provide evidence for, that there are still significant persistent problems caused by antisocial behaviour. There continue to be poor property conditions, high levels of deprivation and crime. And these are the 4 criteria that Nottingham are looking at. There are 2 other criteria within the Housing Act, which is low demand and also migration. And the council hasn't really got those sorts of issues in Nottingham, so we haven't considered those. These are the 4 criteria that we are considering. And so licensing, the council believes, is a tool that can help address and deal with some of these problems. So I'm just going to touch on each of those briefly. There is a lot more information in the reports that are available on our council's website that the executive board of the council agreed in May to help provide the evidence for a second scheme. And the survey that I've got a link for at the end of the presentation, you can find more information about the detail behind just some of the highlights that I'm going to pick on today. So in terms of antisocial behaviour and crime and ASB rates are higher, significantly higher in areas where there are a higher number of private rented property households. And also 72% of ASB reports come from properties where there's high private rented sector properties in lower super output areas, LSOAs, which is a term for a geographical area, despite containing only 54% of households in those areas. And this was work done by the Crime and Drugs Partnership that sits within the council, but also is able to access police data and some of the other statistical data that we've been able to access. And in terms of property conditions, poor property conditions, areas with a high proportion of private rented properties are still more than twice as likely to experience issues of disrepair, and 1.5 times more likely to experience excess cold. We continue to find poor property conditions when we inspect properties. We have made significant improvements in the properties. You as landlords have also made improvements without us having to intervene. That might be through energy performance certificate related improvements, and obviously that legislation came in 2018, about the same sort of time that our licensing scheme was started. So there's a bit of a dual approach there. A lot of landlords were doing improvements anyway, but also some improvements have also been made because of the requirement to provide an energy performance certificate as part of the licensing scheme application process when we started. So we know that we are one of the highest, we are the highest out of all the core cities that had the most number of energy performance certificates on record. So other councils like Sheffield and Bristol and Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool had lower proportions of properties within their areas that had actually got energy performance certificates in place. And I believe that part of that is around the requirement for selective licensing, putting that as a requirement when landlords were applying for their conditions, for their license. And areas with a high proportion of private rented sector properties are 4 times more likely to report issues of disrepair. And also, nearly all the complaints that the council received about properties disrepair are within the private rented sector. And then the other criteria is deprivation, which the government introduced in 2015. And if you didn't know it, out of 317 council areas in the whole country, Nottingham is the 11th most deprived within that. It's the 4th most deprived out of all the core cities, so we're behind Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham. And there are 56 areas, LSOA areas of Nottingham that are in the 10% most deprived in the country. And 104 of those areas are in the 20% most deprived in the country. And in terms of crime, 28 LSOA areas rank within the 10% most deprived. Has improved. It used to be 56 LSOA areas, and before that it was 87. So things around crime have improved. And again, there are in terms of living environment element of deprivation, 20 LSOA areas are in the 10% most deprived. It used to be 33. So things have improved, but we still are stubbornly low across a whole range of different measures that deprivation uses, and it does use a range of different measures to identify where each council ranks across the country. So just to give you an idea of the current scheme, proposals for the next scheme, I should say, this is a map of the city. The black area is the boundary of the city, and the red area is the proposed scheme. I have got a slide at the end which shows you the current scheme and the proposed scheme. This scheme is smaller, it's more compact. For those that know the current scheme or know the city, the area to the south around Wilford and Clifton, that area is proposed not to be in the second scheme. And to the north around Sherwood, towards Bestwood, Highbury Vale, some of those areas have been taken out as well. And a little bit around Woollerton Park to the west of the city have been taken out. So these are all proposals, and also a little bit that's joined and has been added into the second scheme around Broxtowe Estate to the north. This area just here is new, and that's partly because the numbers of and proportion of private rent sector properties in that area has increased in the last 5 years compared to what we had on our, in terms of, we have BRE have undertaken some research for us, and they identified this scenario where the number of privately rented properties has increased and now meets the threshold for a significant proportion of that area is now privately rented, whereas before 5 years ago that wasn't in the scheme. So I'll show you the scheme comparison at the end. But in terms of a comparison in terms of numbers and geography, this is a very, very quick summary in terms of size. About 52% of the city in the current scheme, 40% in the proposed second scheme. Number of properties, while slightly reduced, isn't as a bigger reduction as we thought it would be, because the number of properties overall has increased. So whilst it's a smaller geography, it's actually a slightly higher number of privately rented properties we anticipate will be in that smaller area compared to the area of the current scheme, if that makes sense. And it covers 79% of the city properties will be licensable, we estimate, through this scheme, whereas currently it's 90% of properties are estimated to be licensable. And it covers a smaller number of LSOAs, which are those areas that we've talked about earlier. And briefly, just going to some of the key parts of the consultation around fees. The proposals that the fees will be slightly lower than what we are now, as Linda mentioned, and I haven't got the comparison actually with what they currently are, but they are reduced overall compared to the accredited and standard rates at the moment. The new proposed fee for less compliant landlords is being proposed for properties and landlords, particularly where we have to chase them. The landlord's not forthcoming with their application, and they're going to require some additional resource in terms of their inspections and management over the duration of the license if we do issue a license. That's why that fee is there, and we're consulting on that. And what we've seen so far, some of the landlords that have responded do like that, and it brings us in line with our HMO fee structure as well, which has a less compliant fee that landlords were supportive of last time. Also, for those that don't know, we do have a block license fee. So this is where there are 2 or more flats within a block, and they are owned or managed by the same person or company, and landlords can apply for 1 license for those blocks. There is a separate policy that sits behind all this that provides a bit more clarity, but there's a different fee structure for those. So you pay for 1 license, but you still have to comply with all the conditions, and actually you get some extra conditions. I'll touch on those later, but the fee structure is different. So you pay like a base fee, and then you pay a fee for each of the flats, and it works out cheaper the more number of blocks, flats that you have within a block. So I think it gets cheaper about 8 or 10 blocks, flats, depending on if it's accredited or non-accredited. But that's, do a bit of maths and you have to work out. We've got some examples in our fee policy that Linda talked about earlier. There are some examples of how to work out the block license fee. So we've got 1 for accredited, we've got a standard fee, again slightly more, and we've also got a proposal for a less compliant fee for blocks as well. And just to give you an idea of the number of blocks, we've got about 100 blocks now. I think we're up to 98 block licenses that we've received, and that covers 6,500 flats. So on average, about 65 flats within each of those blocks. Some blocks are smaller. We've got, I think our lowest is about 5, where I think actually financially it wouldn't have made sense for a landlord to apply for a block license, but they chose to have a block license rather than 5 individual licenses. And I think the highest is in the hundreds, about 200 or 300. So some of the larger, particularly student blocks, usually go for a block license. So in terms of what's hoping to be achieved and aiming to achieve as part of the second scheme of licensing, continue to further reduce antisocial behaviour and engagement with landlords and tenants around some of those issues of antisocial behaviour is really key. And Ed's obviously already talked about the work that we do with landlords and being able to engage through the work that we do where there are issues at properties. And that's what we're really all about, is about engaging, trying to resolve problems and not for them to cause other problems. Continue to drive up the property standards within the properties that we license, and for landlords to be proactive in managing their properties rather than reactive. So when we go out to a property, we haven't got to tell them what to do, but actually the landlords are already doing what they're meant to be doing. And we do see that sometimes, but we do see the opposite as well, where landlords aren't proactive in managing properties, and we've had to serve legal notices, and in some cases we've had to take enforcement action as well against landlords to make sure they are improving their properties and helping to reduce the high levels of deprivation in Nottingham. The living environment is an element of the indices of multiple deprivation, and this selective licence scheme can help support that. And it will do this by making sure that licence holders apply for a licence, and they also comply with their conditions that are enforceable. And that's a really important part of the scheme. And if we go out to properties and the landlords are complying, that's great. And we do recognise that there are good landlords out there, particularly accredited landlords and those landlords that are here today. Just a brief look at the licence conditions that we're proposing. A lot of these are similar to what we have in place already. We've reviewed them a couple of times during the current scheme. And the ones that are new that you may have not seen are around waste management that Ed talked about earlier. We introduced this in February for new licenses that are issued for landlords to be proactive in managing waste at their properties, particularly before tenants arrive and when the tenants are in there and at the end of tenancy. And in terms of training, we now require, we're proposing an intermediate level of training, not just basic. Currently, the requirement is for all landlords to undertake basic training, so landlord fundamentals training, or like Linda mentioned about the training that is accessible through Dash and obviously Unipol. So we have training providers at the end of our license conditions in the annex that landlords can access, and some of that is maybe free through the accreditation provider, and some might be paid for. We're proposing that as landlords have now been operating in this scheme for 5 or 4 years, we up the level of training that's required to an intermediate level. So we'd really value your thoughts on that, and particularly for those people that do provide that training as part of our consultation, but also providers as well. And in terms of block licenses, the overall fees may be cheaper if you've got a large block, but you do have to comply with additional conditions. So some of these conditions are about the overall management of the property, recognizing that the blocks with shared areas, with communal areas, with different bin storage issues, more complex arrangements to deal with fire safety, there is a higher burden on block license holders in terms of how they manage their buildings, and the expectation for them is higher. Also, there's certain things in a block that you wouldn't necessarily get in family housing, like lifts, CCTV, management of common parts that I mentioned, and also lighting, emergency lighting, communal areas, those sorts of things that you won't just get in family housing. So there are the main issues that we want you to comment on in the consultation and a survey, which can be found through this link. It's if you just search for the Engage Nottingham Hub on a search engine, then you should be able to find it. It's the open consultations, about 3 or 4 open consultations at the moment, and selective licensing, when I last checked, was at the top of the page. So that is the end of the presentation. I will just show you the proposed scheme versus the current scheme that I did talk about. So the blue area is the current scheme, and as you can see to the south, those areas are being pulled out, proposed not to be in future scheme, and up to the north, some of those areas have been taken out as well, and around Woollerton Park, again proposed that they're not included, and there's a little bit included actually around Castle Boulevard, just around this area here, and the canal area. That's a new area that's proposed to be included, and obviously this is a new area as well around Broxtowe Estate that's been included as well. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, David. If you could share your screen, and then we've got some questions that have come through on the Q&A.
So the first question is, are there not a large number of landlords who are now licensed without any issues, who were already providing high standard accommodation? Presumably they are not the target of the scheme. Why aren't landlords who have shown to provide quality accommodation exempt from having to reapply for another licence, so that the council can focus on the real issues and perpetrators of those issues?
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. Unlike HMO licensing, where we can exempt different types of properties, it is a bit of a sledgehammer in some ways, because we have to look at geography. We can't look at types of occupation. We can't look at different types of properties. If a geography of the city falls within the designation, the council's got the evidence to show that there is issues around those 4 criteria that I talked about, then the properties have to be licensed. I would really appreciate any comments in the consultation about that, how we can work harder. In Nottingham, we work hard with Dash and Unipol and ANUC around our accreditation fee. And not a lot of other councils have accreditation fees, and that differential in having a reduced fee for those landlords that do operate at a higher standard. But part of the work also does pay for targeting those landlords that continue to evade licensing. We want to make sure that we capture that and also drive them out of the market, so you as good landlords don't get tarnished with the same brush as some of the bad landlords that are out there.
So the next one is, I think many landlords want to provide good quality accommodation and keep their tenants happy so that they stay longer, and keep rent rises to a minimum. Additional costs for landlords generally lead to higher rents being charged to tenants, and won't doing so at this point in time, when people can least afford it, with the exorbitant rising costs of living, lead to further poverty and deprivation. Some, if not many, landlords are on the side of tenants, and maybe that could be acknowledged.
Yeah, there are some really good landlords out there. There are landlords that do want to make sure that their tenants are cared for, and that I don't think any landlord wants to go through an eviction process if they don't have to. With the scheme being in its sort of if a second proposed scheme, any rent rises for the license fees should have been included 4 or 5 years ago. So those are already captured in any rent rises. There are significant rent rises happening for other reasons in terms of supply and demand. But in terms of capturing that rent rise, I don't think a justified rent rise from landlords in terms of having to reapply for the license fee is justified if they've already increased their rents a few years ago, including the fee, from, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when they applied. That should already be captured in any rent rises.
Thanks, David. We have another one in relation to the percentages given in the presentation. Does it include housing association properties is the question.
No, housing association properties are exempt. The government exempts those properties and a range of other properties from licensing. So we don't license housing association properties.
You know the numbers, Dave.
Yeah.
It was gone 32,000 to 30,000.
Yeah.
But we didn't get to 32,000, did we, with scheme 1? Was it about 20?
Yeah, I was looking at this earlier. In terms of total numbers, in terms of total number of applications, including our block licenses, we're up to about 29,000.
Oh, right, you're higher than I thought, yeah.
Yeah, so 6,500 are in blocks, and there's about 22,000 applications, or 23,000 even, that we've actually processing.
Oh,
so
right, okay. You
and
are
we're still
yeah.
receiving applications, even though we're in sort of year 4 now.
I know, my phone keeps ringing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
landlords
Yeah.
are buying and selling.
Yeah.
We're still getting them.
It's still, I think as David said, they're still coming in, which is quite surprising. Surprised us. We thought we'd get some, but not in the numbers we're getting really. So it's an ever-changing market, and engagement with the landlords and letting agents helps us understand that market. So that's good. But
I had a call in the break from a landlord of 5 properties, and 2 were HMOs, but 3 were flats. And he was like, "Oh, do I need a license for those?" So yeah, even in the break of this call, so yeah, they are. I
mean, David, am I right in some HMOs being split up now, aren't they? So that the change, some of the tenure, the way they're formed is the HMOs actually just split up into flats. There's all sorts of stuff going on within the marketplace. So
yeah, in the original, if land's been around long enough, in the first additional licensing scheme, we did license larger houses that had very old converted buildings that were split into flats. Now those flats fall under the selective licensing scheme. So any renewal of those properties will fall under the selective licensing scheme rather than back into the current additional licensing scheme.
So another question is, my existing license expires in December 23. When will the new license commence for me?
Well, it depends if the scheme's renewed, because we've obviously got, it's a consultation, whether or not the scheme goes through the process of renewal. We've got to go to the Secretary of State again. If we look at the same geography, the size is anything more than 20% has to go to Secretary of State for approval. The license, if it does get approved, once the license expires, that will be the point when you'd have to reapply. If the scheme's operating, then well, you won't have to operate when the scheme starts if your license hasn't expired.
That's a good bit then. So if this, because October you started, did you? Was it October?
August.
August.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, or if your current license goes over August, you wait until that's expired and then apply on a new scheme if it's a new designation.
If it's in, that's right.
And if it isn't, you just carry on with good practice.
Yeah. If your license expires and it's not in the next scheme, you won't have to reapply.
And what happens if it won't. No, silly question. Carry on.
So we've got quite a few questions about the maps and the slides. So everything that's been shown is in the reports attached to the link to do the survey. So you can see the full report on the proposed new scheme there. With regard to the overlaid map, we will upload that. It's not on there at the moment. So the one that shows the current scheme versus the proposed scheme, we'll add that to the links after the session so that you can see that as well. A couple of other questions about slides from other people from the waste management presentation. So we will try and make sure that all of the slides are available from today's session. I'll let Victoria cover that one at the end. Just looking, how are we for time, Victoria? Do you want more questions on Selective or? Yes, okay.
Dave's like, no, I'm sure we're done.
I've just put the link in the chat as well. So rather than looking at the slides, if you want to go directly to the link if they haven't already.
Are you doing that thing again where you can put in your postcode? Because that was really good last time.
We're working on it. We haven't got it up and running yet, but a few landlords have asked. If you know the areas of the city, some of them do align with the previous areas. It's around the boundaries, around obviously Clifton and Wilford that are different. But these are just proposals.
Yeah.
The scheme did change significantly last time. We consulted on a citywide designation and it shrank down to a smaller area, so it might change again.
Yeah, look what happened over in Liverpool. A consultation isn't just, especially with the current government, and the current, MPs, that it isn't a dead cert, so landlords do need to, on this call, encourage, if there are agents on this call, encourage their landlords to fill out the consultation. Yeah. All of my tweets and blogs are all have your say, because this is, look, whatever happened in Liverpool, it's not a done deal. So landlords do need to have their say, get agents to have their say. Rant over.
There's a question here on has there been a reduction in ASB crime and deprivation in the areas of the current licensing scheme since it started?
Yeah, so you can see, particularly around deprivation. I mean, deprivation is measured every 4 years, so that's quite difficult. That's done nationally. That's quite difficult to measure exactly, but as I had looked at, I think it was crime and living environment, deprivation has improved in Nottingham, and we used to be 8th most deprived in the country, so we've gone up to 11th out of 317. So we're moving up very slowly. So that's one of the ones that's probably the most difficult to make a big difference on. We've seen property improvements made. Obviously, our poor property conditions are probably fewer, but the Safer Housing team continues to receive significant numbers of complaints from tenants living in private rented properties. One of the really big outcomes I want to make is that all F&G rated properties are removed from the private rented sector in the scheme area. That will be a challenge because some of the properties where there are F&G rated properties, the tenants don't want the works, they're elderly, they don't want the disruption. So there will be a real challenge to remove some of those. And some of the crime and ASB has improved, but what licensing gives us, like Ed has said, is an opportunity to engage both with the landlords and the tenants, and licensing helps fund Ed's work, and also we're able to provide support to landlords and tenants whether looking at illegal evictions or evicting tenants. So we want to provide good, sound advice to ensure that the landlord is operating lawfully, and if they are going to evict, that they evict lawfully, and we provide some support to help with that. And that also is often related to ASB issues. So we have intervened where the landlord's going to evict because tenant was causing ASB. Actually, we stepped in, the tenant accepted they were causing problems, they recognised their issues, but also we said to them, if you don't improve, the landlord will evict you and you'll be very low down on the housing waiting list. So actually they did improve, the landlord kept them in, and we helped reduce something that would have gone to a homeless application with our housing aid team. So we have, that's just an example of several cases where we've dealt with that sort of issue.
Okay, are there any more questions here that we want to pick out? Maybe one more and then we'll probably wrap up.
We've got one here. Wouldn't it be good if more eco-friendly homes were given lower fees? I might just answer that one in saying, if you could propose that through the survey, through the consultation, we can then certainly include it in the reporting on the consultation process and look at that further.
That's a good idea.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Right then, I think there are some other questions. There's too many for us to go through now because we're almost at the end of our time. But all of the, as I mentioned, all of the questions will be picked up and answered through the landlord newsletter. So don't worry if your question hasn't been answered today by the panelists. I hope that was useful. I don't know if anybody wants to make any final comments.
There are more consultation events planned, aren't there, Dave, in terms of face-to-face and online?
Yeah, we've got an online one tomorrow evening. You can sign up on the council's website through Eventbrite, and we've got several happening at we're at Mary Potter on Monday, sorry. We're at Clifton and we're at Bulwell Riverside, Clifton Library and Bulwell Riverside, and some drop-in events at Loxley House as well. So yeah, do sign up.
We've done a few, haven't we? We've done about 4 out of 10 live ones. And online seems to be the most popular. Online and to do the survey online is definitely the most popular.
Right, then, well, I will wrap things up. So thanks very much for all of the speakers today and everybody that's taken part. It's really appreciated. And thank you also to everybody that's come along and for your questions. We hope you found it helpful. As I mentioned, any questions we didn't get covered today will be picked up, but we'll leave it there for now. And hopefully we will see you at another event and perhaps in person soon next time. So take care and have a lovely rest of the week. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Victoria.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.